Every 4 years, the world stops. Billions of people paint their faces. They cancel plans. They cry in stadiums. They lose sleep over a game. And then there's you watching all of it happen, completely unbothered. You don't feel the electricity. You don't feel the pull. You scroll past the highlights without stopping. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you've wondered, is something wrong with me? The short answer is no. The longer answer is actually far more interesting than that. Because the psychology behind people who genuinely don't care about the World Cup reveals something specific about how their brains are wired, and in most cases, it's a sign of something that sets them apart, not something missing from them. Let's get into it. Reason number 1. Your identity was never built around a team. The first thing you have to understand about sports fandom is that it's not really about sports. It's about identity. When someone says, "We won last night," they didn't play. They didn't train. They didn't make a single decision on that pitch. But they said, "we." And that's not a mistake. That's the psychology of group identity working exactly as designed. Psychologists call this BIRGing, basking in reflected glory. When your team wins, your brain registers a version of that victory as your own. Your self-esteem rises. You feel pride. You feel belonging. You feel like you matter because something you're attached to matters. For people who care deeply about the World Cup, supporting a national team is often part of how they answer the question, "Who am I?" It's woven into their culture, their childhood, their sense of where they come from. But here's what this means for you. If you don't care about the World Cup, it often means you never adopted that particular identity anchor. Maybe sport wasn't part of your household growing up. Maybe your sense of self was built around something else entirely: your work, your creativity, your relationships, your ideas. Maybe no one sat you down in front of a screen and told you that cheering for 11 strangers was supposed to feel like something. You're not broken. You just built your identity differently. And the brain doesn't grieve anchor points it never had. Reason number 2, you don't experience tribal emotion the same way. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The emotional charge of the World Cup isn't just about football. It's about tribalism. It's an ancient circuit in the human brain, the one that says, "These are my people, those are the others, and we are in competition." Sports tap directly into that circuit. The colors, the chants, the flag, they're all tribal signals. And for people who are wired for high tribal responsiveness, it works. It floods the brain with adrenaline, oxytocin, cortisol. It feels primal because it is primal. But not everyone's tribal circuitry responds to symbolic competition the same way. Some people are wired for direct, real-stakes connection. They feel loyalty and belonging most strongly in actual relationships with people they know, work with, or love. The idea of feeling emotional solidarity with millions of strangers over a ball entering a net just doesn't activate the same pathways. This isn't emotional coldness. It's actually a marker of a more selective attachment style. You bond deep rather than wide. You save your emotional energy for things that actually affect your life rather than spending it on symbolic outcomes you have no control over. That's not detachment. That's discernment. Reason number 4, you have a low tolerance for manufactured urgency. The World Cup is, among other things, a media event. The build-up is enormous. The coverage is relentless. The emotional stakes get amplified through every channel: television, social media, newspapers, until the whole thing feels like a global emergency that demands your attention and your emotional investment right now. For people who care, this amplification is exciting. It makes the event feel bigger, more meaningful, more worth caring about. For people who don't care, it often triggers something very different. It triggers resistance. Psychologists call this psychological reactance, the instinctive pushback the brain generates when it senses that its freedom to choose what to care about is being pressured. When something is shoved at you with the message that you must feel this, that every person with a pulse is engaged, that not caring makes you strange, some minds quietly but firmly reject the whole thing. The louder the insistence, the less interested you become. This is particularly common in people with strong autonomy drives, people who need to feel that their attention is their own. For them, mass emotional events can feel manipulative rather than magnetic. The moment it becomes socially obligatory to care, they stop wanting to. This isn't contrarianism for its own sake. It's a deep-wired need to choose your own emotional investments rather than have them chosen for you. And in a world designed to hijack attention at every turn, that quality is actually quite rare. Reason number 5. You allocate attention based on personal relevance. Think about the things you genuinely care about, not what you think you should care about, not what gets the most coverage. The things that actually hold your attention, that you think about when nothing is demanding your focus, that you'd pursue even if no one around you cared about them at all. Notice how specific they are. Notice how personal. People who don't care about the World Cup tend to have a high threshold for relevance. Their attention doesn't activate easily for things that don't connect back to their real life, their actual goals, their direct relationships. They're not selfish, they're focused. For them, a football match between two countries they've never visited, decided by players they've never met, has very little direct relevance. And their brain, which is always making unconscious decisions about where to allocate finite cognitive energy, simply doesn't assign it priority. Meanwhile, those same people often care intensely about things others find niche, abstract, or pointless. A problem they're trying to solve, a craft they're trying to master, a question they can't stop turning over, an injustice that everyone else has accepted. The brain has the same amount of attention to give regardless of who you are. The difference is only in where that attention goes. And the person who doesn't care about the World Cup is usually someone whose attention is already spoken for by something they chose. Reason number 6, you're comfortable being out of step with the crowd. This one is perhaps the most underrated. Right now, during the World Cup, the social pressure to engage is enormous. Conversations are dominated by it. Group chats light up. Offices split into camps. Social media becomes a single topic. And opting out means being, in some small but real way, outside the collective experience of everyone around you. Most people find that uncomfortable enough to fake engagement. They'll watch matches they don't care about, pretend to have opinions on teams they know nothing about, perform enthusiasm they don't feel because belonging to the moment feels safer than being outside it. But you don't. You sit with the discomfort of being out of step and you're okay. You don't need the shared experience badly enough to manufacture interest you don't have. That takes a particular kind of psychological security, a sense of identity that doesn't depend on synchronized cultural participation. Research on psychological autonomy and self-concept clarity shows that people who are less swayed by collective behavior tend to have a more stable, internally grounded sense of self. They don't need external events to organize their identity. They already know who they are without the flag, the jersey, and the national anthem. That's not aloofness. That's security. Here's the thing about the World Cup. For the people who love it, it's genuinely beautiful. It connects them to their culture, their family memories, their sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. That's real. That's not trivial. Human beings need that kind of connection, and the World Cup delivers it on a scale that almost nothing else does. But the people who don't feel it aren't missing out on connection. They're just finding it somewhere else. They find it in the quiet Saturday mornings spent on work they love, in the conversation that lasted 3 hours, in the book that changed how they see everything, in the problem nobody else thought was worth solving, in the relationship they've been quietly tending for years. The World Cup asks you to feel something collectively, on a schedule, for strangers, at high volume. Some minds are built for that. Some minds aren't. Neither is superior. They're just different architectures for the same human need, the need to care about something, to feel something, to belong to something. If you're someone who watches the world go crazy over the World Cup and feels nothing, know this: you're not emotionally deficient. You're not culturally illiterate. You're not broken. You're just someone whose caring runs on a different frequency. And the things you care about, the real ones, the specific ones, the ones nobody demanded you care about, those things are worth more than any tournament. Because you chose them. If this video described you, there's probably a lot more about your psychology worth understanding. We cover exactly this, the hidden patterns behind how certain minds work, every week on this channel. Hit subscribe if you want more. And drop a comment below. What do you actually care about instead of the World Cup? I'm genuinely curious.